blocker of Hextall. Fed around to the far side. Flyers a little lax in picking up Robinson, who puts it cross ice off the body. Breakaway Eklund. He's gone for the hat trick. He's in. Shot. Score. Hat trick. Pelletier Eklund. That for Philadelphia in their history is their 12th playoff hat trick, and the other one this year, Tim Kerr against the Islanders in the first game of that set.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. Hey, everybody, it's Isaiah, just reminding you about Jim's South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. They're back. That's right. After the fire, they've returned, and now you have in the 40-year tradition of Philly cheesesteaks. Jim's South Street, down on 400 South Street in Philly. If you're down there, check it out. The finest cheesesteaks, hoagies, and fries in the grandest Philadelphia tradition. You know you want one. And if you're down there, if you live down there, of course you can use Grubhub or DoorDash, whatever it takes. Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia. They're back. Get one soon. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 254. The Philadelphia Flyers are kind of playing, I guess, in the dog days of their season. They've lost 6 out of their last 7. They are 28-33-8 for 64 points. This is no use really talking about the playoffs. It's really a race to the bottom. I think they're 5th right now. So 4th or 5th from the bottom is not out of the question, depending how long this losing streak goes on with 13 games remaining. So we're going to talk about a little bit about the game action and the breakout of Bobby Brink, that star for one game. And then we'll get into more exciting, more fun stuff and speculate upon who may be here, who may not be here, and some of the strategies may be employed by the Flyers front office this offseason. Let's start with our panel. Oh, by the way, we are brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com and Jim South Street and Summit Adjusters, in case I forgot to say that. Chef, what's your initial thought for tonight's show?
I have an interesting way of looking at it from the rest of the season now. I'll bring it up a little bit later on when we get in the nitty-gritty of things, so to speak. But I can't wait. We haven't had Johan on in a while. I'm looking forward to talking to him about all this, and Dan as well. So let's begin. Let's get it started.
You got it. The great Dan Silver. Why don't you weigh in for yourself here?
Tankathon.com. That's going to be the most trafficked website by Flyers fans the rest of the season, I think. We've got 13 games left, and it's not pretty, and we're just watching the draft position. That's what I'm doing.
You got it. So this guest is not a newbie to the O&B Puckcast, but it was about 5 years ago. We had Johan Gartner on, and I call him Sweden's #1 Flyers fan. And we'd like to welcome you back, Johan. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a long time, but I've been excited all day to talk Flyers, which, considering how bad they're playing, probably isn't a good thing. But we're kind of used to it at this point. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me on.
Oh, no problem. Now, in this first segment, I imagine that your pants will still be on because we're going to talk about the current team. But then when we get into the off season, you can spring into action. You know what I mean?
You are correct, sir. Depending on who they draft this summer, pants may or may not be on or off. It depends.
Yeah. It depends on the tankathon. Yeah, it's really funny. Dan had mentioned tankathon. Kevin Kurz took a shot on it, and he got the Flyers in the first shot as #1 overall. So let's hope Kevin is a seer. Maybe he's on to something. But let's run through this. Johan, it's been a rough week for. Well, more than a week. It really, since Farabee and Frost were traded, the Flyers have had some good efforts and just didn't have enough talent. And then when they got rid of Lawton and Kuzmenko, who is somewhat of a contributor to the team, and Mr. Fun and Games in the locker room, Erik Johnson, it just seemed to fall off of a cliff, whether it was how they felt inside or the actual talent on the ice. I don't know how many of these games you've watched over the last little bit. Your general impression about the team and how predictable this kind of was.
I mean, I've watched every game, unfortunately. At least the last month or two. I mean, there's no denying it that they are tanking for sure. Considering the players they got back, first of all, from the Frost Farabee trade. But then also when you trade Scott Lawton, there's no hiding it. They're obviously trying to tank. But they've never really gone out with it publicly, I would think, to say that they're trying to lose. That would never be the case. But if you look at the lineup, is anyone surprised they're losing? I mean, it's not a very good roster. So I think I actually thought they played pretty well in the last game against the Lightning. Probably should have scored, but still lost 2-0, shut out 2 games in a row. I don't see why they wouldn't be able to get a really high draft pick. I'm kind of dreaming of a top 3, but you never know. There are some bad teams this year, but I'm holding out hope that they can maybe get a really good player this summer.
Yeah, it seems like the West is really the problem for the Flyers. You know, when you have teams like Chicago and San Jose and even Nashville, you know, Nashville's the only one that they have a prayer to catch. And so that's if you're looking down as opposed to up at the playoffs, like I think most of us are, that's the issue right there. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting because I don't know exactly what the percentages are if you're at the bottom 5, but do you remember what position they jumped to second when they picked Patrick? I can't remember, but it was quite the leap, no?
Yeah, I think they were supposed to be something like
they were like 9 or
11?
10.
Yeah, something like that.
9, 10 or 11. Yeah, that was a miracle.
Yeah.
There is a chance. There are some good players. I think everyone knows that the Flyers need pretty much players for every position, but they do need that center. And a part of me wants them to tank even more for next year, because that's when you get McKenna, which is a ridiculous talent, but I don't see that happening.
No, it seems like they've reached a point based on their moves, and Shep will get to you right after my little discourse here. It seems like they're set up to start reversing the trend of what they started when they took over this offseason. So they have to have a rash of injuries and get into like a total stealth tank mode, kind of what they did this year, but even worse with a lot of injuries and things like that. Jeff?
Well, I want to go back to what I said on the last. There was got to be almost 10 days now on the last show we did. I don't see more than them winning 20% of their games, like 4 or 5 games the rest of the season. When I said that, and if you look at who they're playing, they got a good Capital Stars, Toronto. They got some big games in there. There are a couple of bottom feeders down there like Buffalo, Nashville. But if you look at teams like that they're playing, Buffalo, and you could argue that they have more talent on those teams that are left. The only reason they overachieved to get to where they are, and it's kind of hurting them now when it comes to this, like what Johan said. They're not tanking on purpose. They're tanking because that's all that's left. I mean, you just take away some pieces here, and that's what you got. It wasn't. I really think that they thought they were going to compete up until the end, and that's why I said that they would make that last push. And I think I'd mentioned too, like, even with the morale of the locker room after you make these trades, I said you can't help it. You can't help but see that it did hurt the room. It really did, and they were so concerned about the room, and they just did it anyway. So they're tanking without tanking is basically Johan's right here. So. I just wanted to bring that up and say that if you do the math the rest of the year, they could end up in 4th. If you look at all the other teams, the Buffalo and whoever's in Nashville all around them and ahead of them, technically they could really end up in 4th.
But they could end up in 3rd. I mean, Nashville only has 6 more points than them, and Nashville has 2 games in hand. So they're not going to go any lower than 3, But if you look at the Flyers schedule the rest of the way, I mean, I only see, if you took every game in and of itself, I almost only see 2 games that you would expect to win, which would be maybe the home game against Buffalo on March 29th and the home game against Nashville on March 31st. But even the Flyers going to Chicago, I mean, I don't know. I might take the Hawks in that game. So, yeah. The Flyers may only win 2 or 3 games the rest of the way, and Nashville's got 2 games in hand on them. So you never know. I think it's possible they could get that 3rd spot going in the lottery.
Yeah,
those last 2 games could be really interesting since they're playing the Sabres and the Preds. Those could decide.
The last 2 games are Columbus and the Sabres.
Oh shit! I was looking at the wrong month. But those 2 could be interesting if you think about the placement on.
The 2 games against the Sabres certainly are going to have an impact. And you got to kind of hope that the Sabres have been so bad every year. They're probably sick of being so bad. Maybe they'll, if they can split with the Sabres, I think that would be okay. Win 1 and lose 1. Yeah. Losing both would be great.
Yeah, if Josh Norris could ever get healthy. Again, he's hurt again. It's unbelievable. They traded for him anyway. That's Buffalo for you. So, but
at least we're not Buffalo. So there.
Okay, but I think that we got a couple issues here in terms of the room and Tortorella and Cam York. But I think addressing what we have left for the season, I think the number one factor in those games with the dearth of talent that the Flyers have, Johan, is the goaltending. And it seems as if the Flyers are still committed to Samuel Ersson. And if Ivan Fedotov plays well, he's really auditioning for other NHL teams, not so much for the Flyers. Do you think I have that right or what?
I want Samuel Ersson to be one of the guys for the long run, but I just don't see it. To be honest, I don't see it with any of the goaltenders they have right now. It has to be so demotivating when they're actually putting up a good game, and then that they're pretty much guaranteed to let in 1 bad goal at least every game.
Mm-hmm. And
since they don't have the team to outscore teams, they need to win those 2-1 games, those close fought games, and I don't know how many games they've lost because one of the goaltenders pretty much give up a soft goal. I just don't see how either of them can be here for the long run, unfortunately. But I hope I'm wrong.
Well, that's going to be really interesting because, as Isaiah said, I mean, I think our thought process is that this offseason, they really want to supercharge things and go out and make a splash, maybe try and offer sheet someone, try and really add some talent. And if these goaltenders, if you're not going to have a franchise goalie until Yegor Zavragin arrives, what do you do? Are you going to go out and try and find someone else? Or are you going to ride Ersson and Fedotov when you're trying to be competitive? I think it's going to be a little bit interesting because I don't really think I think they want to spend money on other things other than goaltending. So, I've seen some mentions of Carter Hart's name. I mean, I know John Tortorella mentioned him in an interview. I don't think that I don't think that we're going to have any clarity on that court case anytime soon, but it is kind of interesting that his name has been mentioned. But they're going to have to, if they really want to compete next year and try and make the playoffs, they may have to address the goaltending, but I don't think they want to spend money to do that. So,
well, I think the thing is they may look at either one of the guys they have now as like a 1B, and they'd have to go out and get a 1A. And I've been reading and listening, and I came up with some names of goalies that possibly they could look at. I have no idea what this circumstance of a trade would be or anything, but the names that come to mind are John Gibson, Frederick Anderson, Billy Husso, and even David Riddick. Would be a tandem, and I still think it would be Ersson, but who knows? If Fedotov shows well, maybe they would give up on Sam and he could be part of a trade to get something else with another player. Johan, what's your thoughts on any of that or the goaltending in general?
I mean, I can't imagine them going into next year with the same tandem, first of all. And obviously Fedotov has a bigger salary cap and they're both signed one more year, if I'm not mistaken. I could definitely see them trying Ersson in a 1B spot and then trying to trade for someone. I like John Gibson. He's been a part of a really bad Anaheim team for a long time. But I've always liked him. But he has a big cap hit, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I don't know how much left he has on his deal, but I've always liked him. But
it's only a couple more years, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like that could be one of those goaltenders that they trade for. But at the same time, they have so many other needs too. It's difficult.
Yeah,
maybe the goaltenders would play better if they have a better team in front of them. You never know. Ersson is still only 24, 25.
Yeah, Gibson is 6.4 million with 2 years left. So that would kind of bridge to Zavragin. That would be the mindset.
Yeah.
Or Billy Husso is a unrestricted free agent. He's kind of like the third wheel there, and he's got 4.75, but that was his last year. And if he's a third string guy, but he'd probably be a guy who backs up Ersson in that case. So it's kind of like, take what your pick. And some of the other names I mentioned are in the same realm as Ersson. It just seems like Sam can handle like 35, 40 games, and that's about it. After that, he's just not working out.
At least he has shown flashes.
Right.
With Fedotov, there's been that one game here and there where he's had a good game. With Ersson, at least with him, you've had where he's had, I don't know how many, but let's say 5 games in a row where he's shown something, or maybe 7 games in a row. I haven't seen anything remotely like that from Fedotov. It's been that one game, and then he's had a couple of games in a row where there's been that 1-2 really bad goals, stuff like that. But goalies are weird. All of a sudden, they just get it, and they turn into a ridiculous goaltender who just becomes a starter and plays 50-plus games.
It can happen. They definitely mature later. And I remember listening to was it Steve Alliquette from Clearsight Analytics? He was King Henry's backup with the Rangers for years. And he was talking about goalies and how much minor league experience they get. And he said, if they get less than 200 games, if they do make it, it's generally with another organization, not the one that drafted them.
Yeah.
So interesting analysis by him. But so that takes us to other positions. You know, one thing that came up, and it was such an issue that Chris Pronger weighed in when Tortorella was talking about kind of dumping on Cam York, like the way he did with Couturier the prior year. Dan, the thing was, Pronger said, you know, he kind of did this last year. And in Pronger's words, I don't know who he talks to or anything like that, that he kind of lost the room last year. Like, and he could be doing something very similar by saying what he did publicly about Cam York. What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting when a guy like Chris Pronger comes out and starts talking about what John Tortorella is doing. The Cam York thing is interesting because from what I've heard from different people is he's still not really recovered from the shoulder injury that he suffered actually at the Caps game that I was at in DC. And there's questions about with Couturier, was he still nursing something when Tortorella kind of went after him? Tortorella didn't pull punches with Joel Farabee when Farabee was kind of recovering from the neck surgery. And I don't know if that had anything to do with Farabee's play, but so that's one part of it, is that these guys who may be recovering from injuries and are still hampered by them, Torts is going after, which I don't really think is appropriate. And then the other thing is you've got these players that are basically telling the media that they're not being told by John Tortorella why they're being scratched or what's going on. And it kind of really points to a real lack of communication between the coach and his players, which Chris Pronger said is a major issue. So it is interesting. I like Cam York as a player. I don't really like the way that, especially if he's still dealing with this injury. And, if the offseason comes and we find out he needs to have some kind of shoulder procedure or something, I would just like to, it would be a lot more palatable if Tortorella was having conversations with the players and discussing these things with them, but he's clearly not, which I think doesn't create a good situation.
That's insane to me that he's not having that discussion with the players.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there has to be communication, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it seems like the guys that he doesn't communicate with are the players who he just doesn't really like, for lack of a better word. He clearly didn't like Morgan Frost, and same thing was going on with Frost, where Frost would say, yeah, he's not really communicating with me. I don't really think he likes Couturier as a player. I think we've established that he likes players who kind of are fast skaters, play with a lot of pace. And so I think guys like Couturier and Frost, he wasn't a big fan of. York could be the same thing, and he just doesn't communicate with these guys. So it's a problem for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he didn't like Bobby Brink last year, and Brink has improved in his speed, his strength, and his checking. Last year, I remember it was kind of notable to saying he doesn't know how to check. And this year, it is the opposite. It did get his attention. He's improved. Of course, Bobby had that one breakout game that we were talking about before the show started when they beat the Lightning. But another player that is in that kind of category, even though he's new with the Flyers, Jacob Pelletier. Torts is out there today talking about doesn't know where he fits, but I mean he's only getting like less than 9 minutes a game. Like if the guy, like, give him a chance, you want to take a look at a young player, right?
I read about that too, that he does, where the commentary doesn't know where he fits. It's also one of those insane comments to me when he's put him with Delorier and players like that who are
novels.
If we're gonna be completely honest, they're not really NHL players. Of course, you're not going to get anything. He's not a player that's going to be able to carry a line. Put him with actual NHL players, see what you have. I don't see the point of playing him in any other role, then let's see what we have. Who do we want for the future? And that's not just for him; that's for any player.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's insane to me that he basically gets plugged on the fourth line, and that's it. Give him a chance to prove what he can do.
Certainly more than what they're getting. I mean, if they're losing all these games, and they traded for the player, and he was definitely the most attractive piece returning from Calgary. I mean, see if he can carve out a niche. I mean, they have a dearth of NHL talent, Chef.
My whole beef now is this. I mean, look, the season's gone. I don't want to see Delorier again. I guess Hathaway's still hurt. That's fine. I'm fine with that. Let me see. I want to know, like, look, granted, if they're not going to be NHL players, there's probably Lexell is probably not going to be here next season either way. But get what you can out of these guys. I want to see more of the young. Call up people. Try other players on these third and fourth line. At this point, I just want to see that you're actually trying to make an effort, because I understand, like, if this team continues to plummet, like Dan said, possibly 3, I'm thinking 4. They might max out at 4 as a pick. That changes your whole damn strategy drafting and what you do with the rest of your picks. Because, if you when we were doing this, a month ago, we were talking 7th, 8th, maybe dropping back a little bit too, depending, or whatever happens, Now we're talking top 5. And if we're talking top 5 and you get the player that, you get a Hagens or somebody along of that caliber, that changes. It gives you you got a player for the future. Now you could get really aggressive with them other 6 picks in the first round and second round now. You understand? So I think that, if you're really thinking about the future, if you're really building to a winner, let's see what we got that might be able to play even bit roles in the future down the line, or audition potential phantoms for the future or whatever, because you still got to stock a franchise. You still got to have NHL players ready to call up for injuries, but they got to know what they're getting into. And it's pointless to bring up a player and only play him 6-7 minutes a game.
Well, I get that. The problem with right now is the Flyers only have one regular call-up left. Any other call-up they make would have to be an emergency due to injury or something like that. So they're a little bit backed up against the wall. Johan, do you know anything about Grebenkin or Grebyankin, the Russian player that they acquired?
I don't know too much. I watched a lot of video on him when he got traded. Obviously, I saw the interview he did that he got famous for.
Yes.
So I did see some stuff with him back then when he did it, but I haven't watched too much of his game before. But I would take him over a 3rd round pick any day in that trade.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They have very little. How do you say it? They don't have a lot of players in their system where I feel this is going to be an NHL player, especially high caliber ones.
Mm-hmm.
Which also kind of goes into the I don't understand why we don't see what a Pelletier can do in a bigger role. Stuff like that. But it feels like in general, there's been a lot of talk about from Tortorella, for example, that the younger guys can have a bigger role, etc., etc. But I'm just so sick of I'm so sick of him as a coach. I don't know if I'm the only one, but all these decisions with, for example, Michkov benching and all that stuff as soon as he makes a mistake. Like, I get it in the start of the season, for sure. or maybe you bench him a period or whatever it is if he does a mistake. But it feels like every time I see Michkov make a mistake, my brain immediately goes to, oh, so we're not going to see him for the rest of the game. That can't be a good thing. And I can't imagine Michkov being happy about it too, whenever he gets benched. So I don't know.
I wish Torts would have had the same approach that with Michkov that he did with TK. TK was making a lot of mistakes, but unless it was a really boneheaded like mistake, he wasn't getting benched. He would say, well, that's TK's play, and we have to, I'm just trying to try to get him to do less of that. And if that's the lesson he learns, I'm fine with that. But like to put him on the bench for a whole period just because he gave a puck away in the neutral zone or wasn't back checking or whatever, I really don't see how that really benefits anybody anymore.
Well, that's the thing. Look, it's in our notes that we're going to talk about. John Tortorella, has he reached his expiration date? We've mentioned a lot of reasons why. Maybe his time is up, and with the dearth of talent, they might need a younger guy or someone with a different approach that might be better. John came in here and set the so-called standard with the culture or whatever you want to call it. But is with 1 year left, are they going to let him come back as a lame duck? Do you think they have a secret understanding? Kind of like, will he be with your organization next year, Dan? Well, what's your hope and what's your gut feeling about where this is headed?
I just don't think that they're ready to move on from him as head coach. I think there'd be a lot of conversations behind the scenes, obviously, that we're not privy to, but I just know that they've just set it up. Dan Hilferty has set it up as this triumvirate between Danny Briere, John Tortorella, and Keith Jones. And I don't think that they're at the point yet where they would be willing to get rid of him because they're still in the rebuilding phase. And I think Torts probably wants to be part of the rebuild. So I don't think he's going anywhere in terms of being the head coach. But I'll say this, if they go out and they make a big splash with an offer sheet and they bring in a number of talented players for next season, and they start having some of these same issues with a way more talented roster, then I think the noise will start getting a lot louder. But I just don't think right now they're at a point where they're ready to move on from him. That's just how I kind of see it right now.
I would be surprised, even though I personally kind of want the new coach. I don't want the new coach just to get a new coach. It has to be the right kind of coach for the players or the play style that they want to play. You need someone who is going to be able to continue to develop a Michkov and whoever they draft this summer or next year, etc., etc. It has to be the right guy because you can't go when they're going to make the switch and start contending. You can't be having the same coaching carousel over and over again. And it's the same with something that's been an issue for I don't know how many years, 5 years. I feel like they've been probably at the bottom or bottom three in power play, for example.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. Like, the thing is, everybody wants to fire Rocky Thompson, and I think he's probably doing a decent job in the other parts of his job. Why don't they just bring in a power play coach specialist?
Yeah. I don't know how good or bad the penalty kill has been for the past couple of years, but I know that's been an issue too. I think it got a bit better, but it's not perfect, obviously, but it's never going to be perfect if you're a bad team. But the power play, most power plays they look so bad. The fact that there hasn't been a change in the power play, like a power play specialist coach or anything like that for the past few years is actually, I can't believe it because it's actually, when you look at it, it's like they don't have a game plan. And even if you look at the other teams, that are bad. Maybe a Buffalo or a Nashville or whatever team that's bad. Even though they're bad, you can kind of see that they actually have an idea what they're trying to do, especially on the power play. So if you keep Tortorella, I would at least like to see some sort of change to whoever runs the power play.
Well, the power plays
yeah
a whole other thing. I mean, and this was Kevin Kurz also was kind of engaging in some of these conversations that I saw on X, but they're complaining that they don't have a guy to play the point on the power play. They haven't stuck with anyone long enough to really see what they can bring. Jamie Drysdale, I'm not sold on him in that spot, but he was okay early in the year. They took him off it. I thought the best guy that's been the point guy on the power play has been Emil Andre, who I thought was, pretty effective. Then they sent him down. Now he's back up. He's getting some power play time. But I just don't like the decisions they make. They had Ristolainen, as the number one power play guy leading up to the trade deadline. I thought it was to get points to try and increase his value. But now I don't even know why they were doing it. It just seemed like they don't have a clue there when it comes to what they're doing with the point on the power play, and they keep changing up the personnel that's on the top unit. And that's after at the beginning of the season, they basically said they were going to keep things consistent to try and build chemistry. So it just seems like they have no idea how to fix the power play. Kuzmenko, I think, charged up the first unit a little bit, and of course they traded him. So yeah, they've got to figure that out. I don't know how they're going to do it, but yeah, I would probably take Rocky Thompson off of the power play coaching. And last offseason they made a big deal about how they were bringing in Patrick Sharp and John LeClaire, and they're going to be part of a power play committee.
And Danny Heatley.
Everyone's going to be looking at it, and it clearly, had very little actual positive impact on the ice.
Yeah.
They have to do something because it's not like it's this season. It's been a consistent issue for, I think it's 5 years now.
Well, it's 3 years in a row in last place in the league. And this year they're 30th and vying to make it 4 years in a row. So they really have not been the same since Ron Hextall arrogantly fired Joey Mullen, kind of like, well, almost saying flippantly, well, we didn't do well in that on those squads this year. And like, almost like saying, well, we don't need him. And it's almost like the curse of Joey Mullen,
Yeah.
Just crazy. And all those years ahead, they had Drew and just, you took for granted that the power play, whether it was going from chemo to ghost or something, they always had something, it's just, it is frustrating. And if you could isolate, and you can do this with the power play. If you look at certain factors or verticals with the Flyers in isolation between the power play and this year, especially the goaltending, and last half of last year when Hart was out of the picture, if you just improve in those areas, I mean, you got about 5 to 7 more points, easy.
Yeah, probably more.
Yeah, probably more is right. And this year they probably should have had if they had average goaltending, they probably have 7 or 8 points more than they have right now. Chef?
Add it all together. I mean, you could say all these things added together makes them a playoff bubble team. If they addressed the little things that we've been stressing now for the last couple of years, the power play, goaltending. The biggest flub is the goaltending, I think. How do you walk into this season with 3 backup goaltenders and no real person out there, especially after you supposedly planned for the departure of Carter Hart, right? To me, it's a major flub.
Yeah, well, that's something that the aforementioned Kevin Kurz is kind of like rabid about. Like this one, probably the biggest mistake Danny made. But Johan, looking forward, speaking of Kevin, he had an article out today, and he was kind of looking at this cap wages site and figured that the Flyers, after they pay Cates, Cam York, if he's still here, and Tyson Forster, should still have like $13 million in cap space, and that doesn't count the 6.25 for Ryan Ellis. So some kids could be put down, on a paper transaction, and they could add that. So if they maneuvered their way around it, they'd have almost, $20 million to spend, not counting who they might trade to go out the door to acquire somebody. So you got to think they're going to move forward.
I would be, you never know, because everyone every year talks about, we got to trade draft picks and all that stuff. But Flyers are in such a good spot with their current draft picks to speed this process up. Now, whatever the right moves is, who knows? What is available, who knows? But they have this year 3 first-round picks, 4, I believe, second-round picks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have, I think, 2 first-round picks in 2027 or something like that. They have so much draft capital where they can speed this process up. Will they do it? I don't know. I hope so. I think I would be annoyed if they used all those picks and drafted players. I think.
Well, I have a theory about that. Now, that's what I was talking about. Maybe I'm looking at things a little different, but go back to that 6.25 that they're holding on Ryan Ellis. You could look at one of the other teams in the league here that might have a trouble hitting that cap floor, because remember, not only does the ceiling go up, the floor goes up too. So they might need a little help. They might need an extra a thing in the books. That's where some of these extra picks, a 1 and a 2, can go out to somewhere and help take some money off your cap space there, and really help speed your rebuild. Like you said, how many teams actually draft 7 guys in the first 2 rounds, unless it's a complete and utter disgrace of a franchise? I mean, it's just not practical. Let's just say half of them hit. You're paying 4 people all in the same contract year. It becomes a lot of money on your books down the line. It's not very practical. So if you are looking long term and you are doing this, and you look at that 6.25 that you got for Ellis for what? I think it's 2 more years too, right?
I believe so. I'll look there.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, you got 2 more years of that. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah. So you got 2 more years of that. Why not clear the books with somebody like farm it out to somebody else? Let it be their problem if they need to get to the cap space. I think that's where you can weaponize your cap even more so, and really get your rebuild started. Now you can go out and sign somebody for $5.5 million and still have a wiggle room.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, the thing is, in a great draft like 2015 or 2003, one of those, then you're more likely to take a lot of those picks. But yeah, I doubt they're going to use that. The only thing about the draft is you can restock your system, but all of it in terms of, even if they make it, it's going to take 2 to 3 years at a minimum for these guys to become lineup staples. So you're going to have to use some of these picks in combination with other players to try and get, veterans, youngish, hopefully, that move you along. Like, and I'm thinking this year, if they don't go the offer sheet route, we talked about that last year. Last show, where we talked about Gabe Velarde, who's playing right wing, really, as an NHL player, but he could be an offer sheet in Winnipeg because he has center experience. And we had Jim Jackson on last week, and he said, the problem with that is he's having his best year because he's been hurt so much. So you can't screw that up. And Mason McTavish would be my target, but Anaheim can afford to pay him.
Yeah,
because they got so much space. That's the problem with that.
He's the only one I would feel would be a good target, but I don't see Anaheim not matching.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, the names I keep hearing are Velarde and Matthew Nyes, but
Matthew Nyes is a winger, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
They
really need to address.
Right?
They need a center.
Yeah.
They need that top center, and the chances of them drafting a number 1 center it feels extremely low unless they luck out and get maybe a top pick this summer, for example.
Yeah, but I mean, Velarde's been playing wing too. I because those are the names that I've been hearing, and I'm hearing them from what I would consider to be pretty tied in people. I can't help but wonder if they're thinking, go after one of those guys, potentially add a really good winger. Then you've got Lutsenko next year, draft one of the top centers in this year's draft. And I know it's a pipe dream, but I still think that they're going to try and muster up everything within their power to try and see if they can get Connor McDavid to come play here. Like I said, pipe dream, but I'm just telling you, I think that's in the back of the minds of the Flyers front office.
I mean, I'm not saying no. I'll take McDavid.
Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? You got to be stupid other not to say, "Oh no, never mind. I don't want him."
No, but I'm we keep it real here. I'd be over the moon, but I wouldn't count on that, at all.
Isaiah, yeah. That's like saying you don't want the supermodel girlfriend. She wasn't pretty enough. That's basically, what you would say to anybody that would say that they want McDavid on their team.
No, but the Flyers do not have a winning tradition like they had before. They don't have the no tax advantage. That the Flyers really don't have what it takes to attract that kind of player. Now, if we were, if we were Tampa and we were getting restarted and they still kept this thing going, they'd have a much better chance. Just,
I understand that. I understand that the whole idea, but they do, let's just not discount it. They have a lot of incentives. Apparently they have one of the best training facilities in all of hockey. We have one of the best there.
And like the second or third best travel conditions in terms of the schedule. And there's a lot to recommend with the Philadelphia Flyers.
There's a lot to draw people here. Like, and I said it when Brian Propp was on with us. I said, look, you see how many Flyers stay here. Even ones like, Jonesy wasn't here for long. The other was, a couple others that have stayed in this area. It's funny how they stay here because the fans really get to them. The whole Flyer, I guess, it gets into your blood and you stay in the area and they all end up working here or staying here. So there's a lot to offer. I wouldn't discount that. I think the no tax thing is big for Canadian players. I don't think it's that big of a deal for the U.S. ones.
Well, I think that but failing that, the winning, they want to step in a winning situation. But coming closer to what I think the Flyers might do, Johan, I could see the Flyers going out and get like a bridge player, a guy who's got like 2 or 3 years left on his contract, who is at least like a second line level player. And I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
But that would seem to me to make the most amount of sense to kind of get this thing going. But I have my doubts as to whether Lutsenko is ready to step in. I mean, he could be a representative NHL player, but is that the best thing to develop his offensive game?
Yeah, I mean they do have the draft capital, and they will have the cap space to target someone, depending on who's available, and then trade for him and say this is our guy, because they need to get that center who is going to be with Michkov, hopefully for a very long time. That 1-2 punch sort of thing on a line. Obviously, they have way more needs than that if you look up and down the lineup. But you don't really get anywhere without goaltending, and you don't really get anywhere if you don't have strength down the middle. So I'm hoping, whoever it may be, that they try and address it, and I don't see it happening through the draft.
Yeah, they can draft a kid, but he's going to take a while. So you get this bridge player. You hope Lutsenko is ready, if not next year, the year after that. And then it starts rolling along. Things start making some sense, particularly if they did get a Higgins or a Misa. But if let's just say they got lucky, like the Tankathon worked out and they got number 1 overall. I mean, Schaefer is supposedly the best overall talent in the draft. should be a number 1 D. Dan, do you have the discipline to take the best overall player, or is the center need so compelling you got to go with somebody else?
I don't know what their feelings are about Schaefer. I have a sense that if they got the number 1 pick, maybe they would look to trade down a spot or two. I don't know which guys. It's a fascinating draft year because you've got Schaefer and then you've got the centers behind, and I'm seeing a lot of people starting to sour on Hagens. His year hasn't really matched up with what people would have been expecting. I'm starting to see a lot of people getting a lot higher on Johan's countrymate, Anton Frondell. I'm kind of interested in what some of Johan's thoughts are, but it almost seems like Michael Misa and Frondell and even Caleb Denoye, the brother of Flyers Elliot Denoye, those 3 guys, I've seen some drafts going ahead of Hagens. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I don't think they want to take a defenseman in this draft.
I'd be surprised if they got number 1. I'd be surprised if they went for a defenseman. But
who would you take if you had the top pick, Johan?
If I had the top pick, I'm leaning Misa. Probably. I am extremely intrigued with Frondell. I don't know if I would take him with the number 1 pick, but he's having a really, really good year playing against men. So it's he's a very interesting player. Same with another guy called Victor Eklund, plays for the same team, both having really good years. But he's not a center. I think I would probably go Misa. I think if I had the number 1 pick.
Now, what can you tell us about Frondell's game that maybe, you've had the opportunity to see him a lot more often than some people over here?
The thing that for me is he if you didn't know that he was 17 years old, and he's not the biggest guy, but he's dominating against men as a 17-year-old. And I'm pretty sure his points per game average is higher than William Nylander when he played, when he was young. So he's having a ridiculous year. Obviously, the team he's playing for is very good, and they will probably qualify for the highest league in Sweden. Very good on the puck. I feel like he's a bit... It's difficult to explain, but it's almost like the game slows down when he has the puck.
Okay,
Is
it like
seems like
a
he makes everything
kind
look
of thing?
easy, sort of thing.
Okay.
I would say.
What about his skating, just in general?
I don't know what I would compare it to.
I think at 6 foot, 196.
Yeah,
he's pretty thick for his. I mean, I'm looking down the top 10 guys. He's the heaviest in the draft. Well, all right, maybe or second heaviest in the draft, or very close to it. I mean, it seems pretty thick for for his height.
Well, at the age,
he's not small. He's not small or anything. Definitely, I would say he's mature body-wise for his age. Mm-hmm. Very, very smart. He's not a bad skater, but I don't think he would qualify as a great skater.
Okay.
But I feel like it's not I wouldn't say it's a weakness, but it's not like he's the best skater. He's not a McKinnon flying around. But I think overall, just solid at pretty much everything. Very smart.
I think the Flyers could use players that if they're not fast, they need to be strong and like be danglers who can hang on to the puck, especially if they're going to play with Michkov. Because if you have two guys with vision who are pretty good at holding on to the puck, you can create so much. So,
I would say he's very good at shielding the puck. One thing I probably like with him the most is, I think in young players, especially when they're playing stronger, and I mean, he's a kid playing against men, it's very easy to see that maybe he will get bullied around. But you don't see that with him at all. If you didn't see, he has that old, I don't know what it's called in English, but he doesn't have a visor. He has like that cage.
okay.
If you didn't see that, you wouldn't know that he's 17.
Gotcha.
So he's very just strong all around. I would say.
No, that's interesting. Maybe the Flyers, if they do get up there high, it can take some of those other picks with a player and maybe get within range to draft him. And we'll see. Or they trade down in a scenario where they don't want to take Schaefer. I know the Flyers like long, tall, skilled defensemen, and they do need a number one defenseman. So
That's true.
Yeah, if they traded, for example, at the draft, and they got a center who's like a bridge player, I maybe could see him taking Schaefer. So I'm going to disagree with Dan there. Yeah. So Dan had to get going, by the way, folks. He's got a situation with a family member who needs a little help. Nothing too serious, but he's got to take care of some stuff. We appreciate. Yeah. So
I was going to say, sorry. The thing with the Flyers that is, I mean, it's a good thing also, especially since they are real building. It's, you think, could they use a goaltender? Yeah, they could probably use a goaltender. Could they use a defenseman? Yeah, they could probably use a defenseman. Do they need a center? Yeah, they could probably use a center. There's not like, oh, they need a center and they're done. And I mean, Schaefer is a great talent too, so I wouldn't be mad. But it's going to be, no matter who they draft, it's always the same. Oh, they could have had this guy. They could have had that guy. For me, it's intriguing when a player plays against men at a very young age, and he doesn't just look good doing it. He's actually producing at a very high level, even though he's only 17. Which is why someone like Frondell is very interesting.
Right. I mean, if they're playing at a higher level and they're holding their own that way, then it's a much greater tell than some kid who's ripping up juniors and he's got to change his game when he gets in the NHL. Seen that time and again.
So I think Frondell could probably be one of those players who is closer to NHL ready than someone who might get drafted above him. Let's say a Misa. You never know how long he would need before he's ready, or even a Schaefer or anything like that. So it's interesting, but I think if I had the number one pick, it would probably be Misa still, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, it talked about center ad nauseum, so yeah, it's hard to disagree with that. So, well, I think we're going to kind of wrap it there. The Flyers play Thursday night in Washington, and are at Dallas on Saturday afternoon. On Sunday afternoon, they're in Chicago, and then they play at Toronto. And then I think at that point we'll be back to talk to you then. Chef, do you have any last words for the folks tonight?
Well, I would just say this. Just this year is a bust. It's done. It's done already. It's done. Just look, every loss gets you closer and closer to that higher pick that we know we're going to need. And the closer we get, the better it is. So just hang in there. They're done. And they're going to, this is what you wanted and you didn't want at the same time. Everybody wanted them to tank. Now that they're tanking, they suck. They're never going to be better. Well, you don't know that. This is like the best part. This is like the off season before the off season. This, you can still have hope. Like until we don't get that third, fourth, or fifth pick, we still got it. You see what I mean? So, and hey, if you want to argue with me about that, you can get me at Chef to Let Be on Twitter, Chef to Let Be on. Oh, I'm sorry, X.
Oh, that's okay. And you can catch.
I still say Twitter.
Yeah, so do I.
Most people. Yeah, and a great Dan Silver. You can reach him at dsilver88 on X and Blue Sky. And Johan, thanks for coming on. Love having you on. Hopefully, again very soon. But any final thoughts before we call it a night here?
I kind of want to build on what Jeff said. I think we're all at a point where we kind of see the vision Danny Briere has right now, and there's going to be some pain before it gets good. The thing that annoys me, and I think annoys more people, is this is what's supposed to happen when Hextall took over, and we should have been through this phase already and been up and running, and now we have to restart it again. And I don't even want to talk about Chuck Fletcher. So we're kind of restarting the rebuild one more time. So there's going to be more pain before it gets good. But I think we all kind of see the vision, at least now, after this season. We can always argue about the trades and the decision he makes, but at least they have a vision they're following. And at least we have Michkov to watch, which is probably the only reason why I'm watching every game still. So hopefully it gets better soon. I want to thank you guys for having me on. It's been a lot of fun. And that's about it, really.
Yeah, our pleasure. Absolutely. So before we go, you can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck on X and Blue Sky. We're also on Getter at O&B Puckcast, at O&B Puckcast. And you can follow us on several podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Amazon Audible, and of course, we're on YouTube and Facebook. Just type in O&B Puckcast, and it'll pop up right for you. If you could follow or subscribe, whatever applies to your platform, we really do appreciate it. It'll help move us up the charts when people are looking for a Philadelphia Flyer podcast. So that's all we have for you tonight. Until next time, everybody, thanks for listening. And as always, take care.